Welcome to Positive Talk Radio, evolving ideas, one conversation at a time. Great guests, dynamic stories and interviews, plus new thoughts on a wide range of topics and concepts. I hope that you'll hang with me, Kevin McDonald, my friends, and of course, you. As together we work to understand why we are all here and what we can do to make our world a better place for all of us. To be happy, be kind, and live in peace together. Yep, that's Positive Talk Radio. The Positive Talk Radio. We've got a good one for you today. One that's going to make you think. One that's going to teach you something, I hope, and teach all of us a little bit about our fellow man and what challenges there are in life. And Leah Rachel is with us. She's an author. She's written a couple of books, and the book that we're going to talk about mostly today is called Seeking Forgiveness. It is the story of her. Well, I'll just let her tell the story of what this is. First of all, Leah, welcome to the show, and thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you for having me, and thank you all the listeners for listening.
You bet. Some people that are listening now and some people that will be listening later. So let's talk about your book, Seeking Forgiveness. What did you do that you need forgiveness for?
Well, the book is a narrative, semi-autobiographical memoir. So it is based on a lot of episodes and vignettes in my life, but it is actually fiction. So it's not fully. So the forgiveness isn't 100% mine. So the idea is it's about interracial adoption. It's about a white mother like myself, who adopts a black son, which I did, and comes to find that she really has no idea what she's doing and has a lot to learn, has to figure out how to sort of navigate this. And I mean, all mothers and all fathers, all parents sort of go through this a little bit, how difficult parenting is. And I believe that the hardest thing is that you don't always know what you're doing. There's no answer key where you can sort of turn to page 14 and it says, you know, what to do, when to give your son a phone, or what to do when he steals a pack of gum from the gas station, or you know, what to do when he tells you at 10 years old he hates his life. Like, there's no answer key. So you're figuring it out. You're hoping you're not messing him up so that, you know, he's going to need therapy when he's older and blame you. So you're sort of seeking forgiveness for all your mistakes, even though you really are trying to do your best.
I remember when my kids are at home, and now that they're in their 30s, they'll say, "Hey, Dad, you remember when you did this to us?" And I'll say, "I don't remember any of that." And they'll say, "Oh, yeah, I remember. It's got it down perfectly. This is what happened." And I said, "No, it didn't." "Yes, it did."
And it's always the negative things that bug them, right? It's not like they remember the wonderful time you gave them a perfect dinner and kissed them all over. It's the time that you forgot to take them to soccer practice or something.
Well, you know that one of my sons, my wife did forget at the time that he was at football practice, and he actually saw her car go zipping by on the road and was on her way home, and she totally forgot to get him, so he had to walk home. And I have heard that story probably 20 times over the mother was so bad to us, and she even forgot me and stuff. So
right.
And
well,
the good. Go ahead.
Well, I noticed, you know, one of the things I'm also learning as a mother is that the issues that were yours aren't necessarily going to be your kids. So I had a single mother who, yes, I have a memory of sitting in those days, they kicked you out on the curb if your parent didn't pick you up. They didn't, you know, worry about you. And I was sitting on the curb watching cars pass, wondering if my mother would ever pick me up from like aftercare. So my issue was that I was never going to have my son be the last kid at aftercare. Like, I'd always pick him up a little bit early. And I thought this was so important. And my son's an extrovert, though. He loves to play. And I remember I would come to aftercare early, at like an hour early, and I would show up and he would go like, "Oh, but Mom, I'm playing with the Legos. Why are you here? Can you leave and come back?" And that happened like 3 or 4 times until I realized, you know, he doesn't care if he stays to the end. Like, I'm trying to fix what happened to me when there's all new issues with him. And you know, and again, you know, I did sort of adopt interracially, so there's whole new complexities that I have no experience with and had to figure out. But it's just interesting. You don't always know what you're doing. You can't predict what's going on. I sometimes wonder what my son's issues with me are going to be, but I don't know what they are yet.
And you're doing one of those things that you are finding out as you go.
Yes.
You'll never know ahead of time, especially with. So let me ask you, what was behind your decision to adopt interracially?
So, well, so actually, so many people think that I adopted because of fertility issues, but that's actually not the case. I got married, and my husband and I were both actually a little bit on the fence of whether or not to have children, and I just wasn't 100% certain. And I had a friend though who, like most people, thought that I was getting older and I must be having fertility issues, and so she insisted I go to like this women's support group thing, and she was a colleague, so I figured I'll go just to get her off my back. And when I went, there were women who were having fertility issues, and one woman mentioned fostering to adopt, like the foster system and fostering to adopt, and I never even considered it. Like it was like an eye-opening, like light shining kind of thing. And I remember thinking, if having a child is not just about like me and some family like I need to have, it's also about the child, then I want to do it. Like I went from being on the fence to like that night, I want to do this. So I came home and said to my husband, what about fostering? And he's like, okay. And we didn't purposely try to go interracially, but sadly, there's more black children in the foster system than white children. So I think the probability was probably high going in, and it turned out that way.
Now, was he a baby when you adopted him, or was he a little older?
He was. So I did. So you can, when you go, you take your classes to become foster parents. It takes a year, 2 years, and they also give you this really long, like 2-page checklist of things that you're comfortable and not comfortable with. And they tell you, which is, you feel bad saying I don't want to adopt certain things. And a lot of it's medical, like, do you want, are you okay with Down syndrome? Are you okay with drug issues and addiction, things like that? And you feel bad, like you don't want to say no to anything. But I remember the social workers, like, it's better you be honest than you take home a kid that you can't handle. And for me, the hardest thing was some of the medical issues. I was actually born really sick and was in a hospital for a long time as a child. So I have a little bit of like PTSD when I go to hospitals. I sometimes have panic attacks. So I said no to a bunch of the medical conditions. But I said yes. I mean, racial things, that's all fine. I don't care. And I said any ages, but I did say a preference for a baby. I did sort of was hoping for the experience from the beginning, on up. And so, yeah, they called me up with a baby that was abandoned in the hospital and come get him kind of thing.
He was abandoned in the hospital.
Well, so the birth mother left. Yes.
Just packed up and left, and that's that. That's so hard for me to believe. After carrying a child for 9 months and going through that, and then she must have been really in a bad way.
Probably. So I do. So one of the reasons that Seeking Forgiveness is fiction and not nonfiction is I actually want to protect the privacy of my son. So some of
Sure.
his birth history and his birth family and their history is really his story to tell. So in the book, I do fictionalize a bunch of that. Like the book is about motherhood, and it's mostly from the mother's perspective. I mean, obviously the child is in there, but it's more from the mother's perspective. And many people have asked me why I did not just make it nonfiction, and this is actually why. So I do get questions about his birth family and his history and what happened. And to be honest, I don't want to talk about that.
Well, and I don't blame you. And until they come forward, if they ever do, and decide that they want to make a change somewhere, but in most cases, when that happens, that they don't want to,
Well,
or
and let me just say, I'm not saying there's anything to be ashamed of or anybody did anything bad. I'm just saying it's my son's story to tell. Like,
exactly, exactly.
I mean, I'm not saying that it was actually anything bad that might have happened, but it's really his story to tell.
Yeah, and you really don't know. Now, as an example, my mother-in-law was adopted, but
Hmm.
way back in the 30s, and she always thought that because she was adopted that she wasn't loved. But then they found out later that the her mother was a 16-year-old single girl,
Hmm.
and in those days they
Hmm.
took girls and put them into a place, and then they had the kids, and then they would give the kids to
Yeah.
somebody else, and then
Yeah.
they'd go back to school and live
Yeah.
their life.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't her fault.
Hmm.
It just circumstances prevented her, and especially in those days, prevented her from being a mom.
I mean,
Um,
I'm glad you say that because that's how I feel. I mean, one thing I can say that I've told my son multiple times is that his birth mother loved him. I mean,
of
she
course,
kissed him all over and she loved him. And life can be so difficult, unfair, institutionally difficult because of racism and other, issues. And so I you, you can't always understand what happened before you came into the picture. And
right.
I think it's important not to be judgmental about it too, because life is tough, man. And my son was loved by multiple women. I can definitely say that.
Well, and I applaud you for doing that and fostering him. And then now in the foster care system, you had the ability to foster him, and then down the road, you decided to adopt him.
So yeah, that's an important question in the sense that you don't know if that's going to happen. So, and actually, I remember being told when I started looking into this. I remember being told that. So it depends. I'm pretty sure foster agencies are run per state. Like I'm not an expert on the foster system. I think it depends per state. But most foster systems they discourage you from entering and becoming foster parents if your goal is adoption. They don't like the term foster to adopt. The idea is the goal, as it should be, of the foster system is reunification of birth families. So, as a foster parent, your job is to be a foster parent and to help with reunification. That is the goal. And so, like, if you go in saying, I want to eventually adopt, they'll roll their eyes at you and maybe even not really try to give you a placement. You have to understand that the primary goal is reunification with birth families. Now, if it can't happen, then they'll say, we need to find a placement in adoption. And so that's how adoption can happen. But you really do need to be careful. And I remember telling my husband, going and knowing that. And I remember telling my husband, like, let's do this thing. But I have no idea how hard that's going to be. Like, if we have a child for a year, 2 years, and then, we have to sort of let him go to his birth family, we should, but that might be so emotionally difficult. I don't know if I'm be able to keep doing it. And I met women. I can still picture this one woman. She fostered. She was hoping to foster a duck. She fostered 9 times, and I met her on her ninth time, and she was returning the child to the birth family and happy for the child, but just bawling. I mean, bawling. Having raised the child for a year or two, and how hard it was to let them go. So I didn't know how long I was going to be able to do it, but I went in to see what happened.
I can only tell you from my perspective that that would be really, really hard to pour your heart and soul into a baby. You bond with them, and then somebody comes and says, "Well, you know what? You have to give them up." That would be really, really, really hard. But in your case, that didn't happen because they.
That did not happen. Yes, we did adopt on the very first placement. That's true, and so that did not happen. Yes.
And that's now. How long did you have to wait before they would allow you to adopt?
Well, so okay, so becoming a foster parent and taking all the classes and getting the home study and all of that stuff takes. I'm pretty sure it took like a year and a half. It took a while. And then again, if you do put a preference for a very young child, like birth or under a year, that can hold. I mean, while there are a lot of children in the foster system, that can hold it up too. So I think it took about another year until there was actually a baby available. So all I know is it was over 2 years from the time, and it was funny because I was just starting to think maybe it wasn't going to happen, or I don't know, we weren't going to get a placement or something. And just as I was like, let's plan a big vacation to Europe, then we get the call, which is I'm glad we didn't plan that, because they give you the call. And I was actually out of town. I was at a conference in Iowa. I always remember. I was actually at the Iowa Writers Workshop
Oh
and
wow!
this summer conference. And I got the call that there was a baby, and they were seriously like, "Can you come tomorrow?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I can come in 2 days. I need a day. Like, give me a day to get there." So, yeah, you go from thinking it's never going to happen to you have a day. And I often told people, I personally find that one of the hardest things about the process is that most having a child naturally, you have 9 months to sort of like plan and ask for leave from work and read books. I mean, I guess we knew this was eventually going to happen, but all of a sudden I had a day, and then I had to like try to sign up for daycare, and there's wait lists of a year, and all of a sudden I had to tell work I have a baby, and no one knew I was about to have a baby. It was like,
Well,
it's crazy to get a baby in a day. Like, that's all I'm saying.
well, I can only imagine, and plus the fact when you got 9 months, and about month 4 or 5, you can find out what sex the baby's going to be, and so you can paint the bedroom, and you can do everything to make it real cutesy and nice for that particular baby. If you got a day, you don't get to do any of that.
Yeah, no, and I wasn't even in town, so it's funny. I called a friend of mine who's a nurse, and I told her, and she's like, "I will take care of everything." So the day it took me to finish up what I was doing and drive back to Missouri, she went to Target and bought like $300 worth of bottles and nappies, whatever, and came to my house and put the crib together and laid everything out on the bed. So I came home to like, yeah. So it does take a support system, and I had a really nice friend who knew a lot about babies and healthcare and helped me out.
That is a good friend. So that's awesome. So you have the baby, and then a year or so later, they allow you to adopt and to move forward with that, and then he's your son, and he is an African American boy who's going to be an African American man,
Mhm.
and you're a white lady. And uh, did you think that there were going to be challenges, and the type of challenges that you have had
I
when
mean,
he
I
was
was
the
certain there
baby?
was going to be challenges. I don't think. I mean, so this was before Michael Brown. This was before everything. It was only a couple years before, but it was really before a lot of before the term white privilege was in common usage. And so there. So I certainly had white privilege. Have white privilege. There are things you don't realize. And I think I was very sort of open and knew I was going to have challenges, but I don't think you can predicted some of these things. Some of these things are shocking. I mean, that happen. I mean, I can tell you a story of like the first time I went to take him to the dentist. He was 5 years old, and it's time to go to the dentist for the first time. So I, give the name of a pediatric dentist, and I make an appointment, and we show up, and we walk in, and the secretary like slides the glass partition open, and she looks at us and closes it and goes away and comes back and opens it and looks us up and down. And she says to me, I need your papers. And I'm like, the insurance card? Here's his, here's mine. And she's like, no, I need your papers. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I have no idea what you're talking about. She's like, I can't treat the boy until I have approval from his mother that he can be treated. And I'm like, well, I am his mother, and I'm here to take him to, And she's like, oh, I can't treat him until you can prove that. I'm like, I don't understand what you need from me. She's like, I need guardian papers, adoption papers, or we can't treat him. Who brings that to it? So again, just shocking. I had no idea something like this could happen. And who brings that to a dentist appointment? So of course we had to leave. And my son's going, "Where's my lollipop?" Because I told him you get lollipops at the dentist. And we go back in the car, and I buckle him in his back seat, and I get in the driver's seat, and then after putting my seatbelt, I turn around to back out. And when I turn around, my son and I make eye contact, and my son says to me, "Did we have to leave because I'm black?" And I said to him, "No, baby, we had to leave because I'm white." And the point of this story is I've been trying very hard. I'm almost about to cry the whole time he's been alive to make him not to blame himself for the stuff that happens in this world. And it's difficult. It happens in unexpected ways like that where you're thrown for a loop and you have to figure out. I mean, that was at 5. So some of the earliest episodes happened well before that. I can think of an episode when he was 2. And you have to think, like, when do you start discussing racism with a child? They can even understand the concept. So you can't. I mean, I knew going in, to sort of answer your question, come around to it, that there would be complexities and difficulties. But I had no idea, and I imagine any white parent can't really have any idea quite what they're getting themselves into.
Well,
Hopefully they can
especially
do it, but yeah.
yeah, especially if he was a white boy or even Asian or Hispanic, they would have just assumed that it was a mixed couple, and there you are. It's that's just frightening to me.
I mean, I just so you know, I reported them to the Missouri Dental Board, and I did call later after I called, and I said, "Do you do that to everybody?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, we ask everybody for papers." And I remember saying, like, "You're lying. There's no way. I don't believe you. I don't believe you." That was their line that was how they were, because they knew I reported them to the Missouri Dental Board by then. So they were claiming they do ask for papers. I've never heard of anybody else who's gone to a dentist and had to prove parentage.
If you do that, they'd have been out of business. I can guarantee you that people would not. Because who would think to take as an example a birth certificate or adoption papers or whatever paperwork that you have, it just
Well, and
isn't
I
done.
can tell you why I found this shocking. Now that I'm aware of stories like this, I've seen other things on like Twitter and in the news. I mean, it was a couple of years ago. It might have been on Twitter, but I feel like it was in the newspaper. I read about something similar happening in an airport where, white woman had a black child and she was trying to take them on a flight, and then the airline people were like, "Is that your, like, are you stealing this child? Or where are you taking this child?" And like having a similar kind of thing happen. And so, it's almost like, what are you, I mean, maybe you should carry a copy of your adoption papers, but how stupid, how ridiculous is that you would even have to? But it does happen. Actually, it's one of those things. I've seen what happened to me. I've seen it described in other places happening to other people.
And your son, because he's 5, he understood that there was a problem, and he assumed inaccurately, of course, but he assumed that it was because of him, and it wasn't because of him, and it wasn't because of you either, by the way. It was because of the narrow-mindedness of the people that you wanted to go to the dentist with. It's just bizarre.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, I really have had a lot of times where I'm very sort of uncertain again about, motherhood's like you don't know what you're doing, how much to explain things or not. So, I can tell you there's another story. I used to volunteer at something in Missouri called Room at the Inn, RATI, they're like RATI, Room at the Inn. And through my synagogue, and what it is like once a month we open up the building to homeless families, mostly women and children, but you sometimes get some fathers in there too. And you just open it up for a night, serve them dinner, give them breakfast in the morning. It's sort of, Room at the Inn, it's called. Anyway, and so once a month, I volunteered for a long time doing that. And then I started bringing my son to volunteer with me because there were kids there and he's a kid and it was fun. It was more, my son is very extroverted. He loves playing with people. So if there's kids to play games with and, play with cars with, he's game. So I for about, I would say 3-4 months, maybe as long as 6 months, I took him regularly to this Room at the Inn where we were volunteering. And again, and my son has a penchant for asking questions when we're in the car. We're leaving at the end of, we would do the evening shift, like play games, have dinner with them. We were in the car, buckled up, I'm backing out of the thing, and my son says to me, "Why is everybody who comes to this thing black?" And it hadn't dawned on me. And I had to think for a second, like, weren't there any homeless people that were white that showed up? But in all honesty, I don't think there were in the 3 to 4 months he'd been going. All of the homeless people who showed up were black. And I should have realized he would have noticed that because it's very noticeable. And we live in a mixed neighborhood, but he's more a minority. It's majority white. I mean, they're definitely not the only black in our neighborhood, but he sees a lot, so he's seen basically white people volunteering and black people there. And he was like, "Why is everyone there black?" And I remember thinking, like, do I explain? And I actually, and it wasn't very old. It was not long after the dentist. I think it was like maybe 6-7 years old. And I remember thinking, like, do I explain institutional racism to him and that, black people have been denied housing and denied jobs and, it creates where do I, and I actually I went on the whole drive home, this lengthy thing about like history and slavery. And then I realized we got there and I came home and I asked him if he had any questions. And he was like, "Can I have some candy?" He like, I don't even know how much he listened to it. He was just like, "Okay, Mom, I need to do something else and not listen to this any longer." So my overall, I'm rambling a little bit. My overall point again is I'm constantly wrestling with how do you deal with these things? How do you describe them so he doesn't feel bad or guilty? How do you describe them in ways he'll understand? It's really difficult. And, and it should be something that all white parents do, not just white parents of black children. It's just that I think it comes up more for us because he notices.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't happen in a white family, generally speaking, because they don't have a reason to that is apparent, like on the nose and front of their face, that they should do that. Which, and there are some people in some parts of the country that even frown on that because they think that
Right.
that will make the white kid feel bad.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
which I don't understand that either. But that's just me.
I mean, do you not teach a child math because some aren't as good at math? I mean, you want to make them feel bad? I mean, no, you still teach them math. I mean, like, I don't understand that either.
You do. So your son now is 12 years old,
He's 12.
and he's about to enter the world of being a teenager. What's that like for him?
Preteen, yes, he is definitely preteen, and he is outspoken, extroverted. Yes, and I feel like while he's preteen, I feel like he's already a teenager. Yeah, because my kid is very. I mean, he's been talking since he was 2, and whatever. So I don't know. I mean, I'm every stage is exciting and scary at the same time. So I'm excited because he's learning more things and doing more things. But I can tell you, I'm very nervous. So the new thing is, my son likes to. We live not too far from a shopping mall, like just a block or so away. And his friends on the weekend like to walk to the shopping mall and hang out there, and like just themselves, and they're seventh graders, and that seems really too young. And I can tell you, like I think the second time he did that, he came home and did tell me a story where he was wearing a hat that had a tag on it, but they bought it at the dollar store, so the tag did say dollar store. But some old lady came up to them and said, "Did you steal that?" Like it has it. Like asked my son if he'd stolen the hat he was wearing, and he was like, "It's a dollar store tag." But so he came home and told me all about it, and we both wondered. I mean, would she have asked a white kid that? Maybe, but either way, it was uncomfortable. And so I don't know. He's going out in the world. You're right. He's a preteen, and he's starting to go out more, and I'm nervous. But he so far has handled it okay. But
I can only imagine. I have a good friend of mine. She's married to a black man, and they have a couple of interracial kids. And she says every time now he's a great kid. He's now 20. He's an actor, and
yeah,
he's very vivacious and a really good guy. And she says every time he leaves the house, I'm scared to death. And so he's on speed dial on her phone,
yeah,
so that if he ever were to get stopped,
yeah,
he would. That's the first call he makes is to mom, because she's going to jump in the car and go find him, and
yeah.
to try and protect him and stuff. And that's got to be a frightening thought
Well,
for.
and I hate it just because, like I keep saying, my son is so extroverted, so he's going to be the type to go out. Like some days, I wish he was just a geek who like stay, and I'm a geek. Like you just read books, write books, stay home. But like that's so not my son. He is out there going to the mall, hanging out, and so I can tell you when we've lived in 3 neighborhoods since he was born. There's a number of reasons for that, but this last one we moved into because it was a very good school district, and I wanted my son to get extra tutoring help that he needed. But it is, and there are black people there, but it is majority white. And I can tell you, when we first moved to this neighborhood, I baked cookies, and I made a bunch of cookies and put them in a little bag. And I said to my son, I didn't tell him exactly what we were really doing. I just said, "Oh, we're new to the neighborhood, and it's really nice to just meet people and say hello. So come with me. Let's give out these cookies." So we spent the afternoon going neighbor to neighbor saying, "Hey, you just moved out the door. Here's some cookies we made," and saying hi. And that's all he knows. But we did that on the advice of a black friend of mine, saying, "You better let everybody know he lives there, and he's supposed to live there. And if they see him walking the streets, they don't call the cops." So the reason I did that actually was so that when neighbors start seeing him walking in and out of our house, no one freaks out. Um, I mean, I wouldn't have thought to have done that without the advice of a black female friend of mine. And to this day, my son doesn't know that that's why we did that. But I think it was a good idea. And actually, because we happened to meet the police chief of the neighborhood, he was patrolling while we did that. And so I made sure he met my son and knew he was supposed to be there. And so it was a great afternoon. We found where the park was. I mean, it ended up being, it's not a bad idea to bake cookies and meet people. It was really fun. We met people. But the reason I did it was so that people knew he was allowed to be in that neighborhood.
Well, that actually was really, really brilliant, because and it was really, really needed. That same couple that I was just talking about, he's a mover,
Mm-mm.
and he is always concerned that when he parks his truck in front of a house and he's starting to take furniture out of it,
Right.
that somebody's going to assume wrongly that he is stealing from that house.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we would like I would like to think that we are farther along than I think that we are in this country as far as racism goes.
I would like to think so too, but as a mother, and again, my book's definitely about motherhood and the perspective of a mother. You just got to be safe. You just can't just assume. Like I'd like to think I didn't have to do that either. And luckily, I mean, I feel like I do live in a neighborhood that's a little more aware of these things. But I mean, you just can't assume. You gotta be careful. You got to be as careful as you possibly can be.
And that's true. Yesterday, I was previewing on another show that I was going to have a talk with you,
Hmm.
and so I said, um, I'm going to ask her the question when you have that talk, and somebody said, "You mean about the birds and the bees?" I said, "No, that's not the talk. That the birds and the
Handle the
bees can
police
wait.
talk.
This is the talk, the most important talk that he may ever have."
Yeah.
And that is how to behave in public and how to behave,
Yeah.
especially if you get the attention of the police.
Yeah. Well, and let me say that, like, I mean, I am telling some personal stuff of my own stories, and I just want everyone to realize some of these are in the book. So some of these little stories have been turned into the book. But at the same time, the child in the book is 16, not 12. So again, it is fiction. And the plot of the book is that the son does get arrested by the police, and the mother has to come down and figure out what's going on, try to figure out if he did do something, if he didn't do something, how to get him out, how to defend him. And especially as a white mother, she's wondering if she's blaming him when he really didn't do anything, or if she should just defend him. I mean, it's sort of confusing. But in the book, so in my own life with my son, I've definitely, actually, in small ways, already started to have the talk. So we've already, like, my driving, been stopped like 2 or 3 times. We've been stopped by the police because I'm speeding or I'm not the best driver. And he's been in the back, and after it happened, like, we talked about it. So organically, as things come up, we've already had little bits of the talk. But I will say, and I do think this is important in the book. Uh, while I give him the talk, I also find a black male friend to give it to him. Because, as a white woman, I can try to tell him how important it is, but I don't think the message gets through as well as him hearing it from somebody who looks like him and who's older than him and can, in all honesty, scare him a little bit and say, you really need to take this seriously. And this is why this happened either to me or my friends. So I think it's important not just for a white parent to give the talk, but white parents they need to make black friends if they don't have them. And they need to sometimes enlist their help, I think, for really important things like that.
I couldn't agree more. By the way, we are talking with Leah Rachel, and she's written the book Seeking Forgiveness. It's a story about a mother, and I feel for that situation. And I know it's a novel, and it's stuff, but there are lots of people throughout the country this has happened to, and it's about a white mom who loves her adopted black son, and the trials and the tribulations that they have to go through, and even culturally things that come up, and even the topic of slavery, which he will hear about. Well, maybe he'll hear about in school.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and let me say, I just want to interject for a second there. While I feel like my most targeted audience is probably interracial families and people involved interracial families, but I will say that I actually feel like my story would appeal as well to just adoption, just in general adopt, because there are stories that I have in there just about adoption. So, like, I have a story, a very good friend of mine from, like, college days. We've been friends forever. I adopted my son, and for his, like, 1 year birthday, she came to visit. And somehow it came up. I was talking about when Hanukkah would come. I celebrate. I mean, my father was actually Roman Catholic. Only my mother was Jewish, but we celebrate Hanukkah. And I remember she stopped and she was like, "You're celebrating Hanukkah?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "Well, wasn't his birth mother Christian?" I'm like, "Yeah," because his birth mother had left him a Bible in the hospital. I said, "Well, yeah." And she said to me, "She goes, well, you have to raise him Christian. You can't raise him Jewish." And I remember thinking, like I was, how would that even work? Like, how would I raise a Christian child when I don't even identify? Like, I literally didn't. And then it made me so sad because it made me realize that other people, like, I view adoption as not only, I mean, it's permanent. There's no going back. I literally actually view my son as almost like my flesh and blood, which I realize literally he's not, but I see him as my flesh and blood.
It doesn't matter.
I,
It
don't, I
doesn't.
mean,
You love him.
I like, I mean, I don't know. So like, it's so permanent and exactly like any other family to me that, in a sense of permanency, that I just, it made me realize how many people don't see us that way. And I'd already gotten weird comments and stuff, but from like, a 20-year-old really good friend to be like, you can't raise him how you are. You have to raise him like his birth mother's religion. I just remember being really, really shocked. And I wouldn't be surprised if other just adoptive families have experiences like that. And so, I do have a bunch of stories that I think, relate to, beyond interracial families, just other family episodes.
Well, I think that's a really good idea because, adoption is hard in and of itself, especially for the child. Um, and they grow up a little bit, and then they find out originally they didn't know they were adopted, and then they find out that they were adopted, and then they have to deal with the fact: did my mom love me? Did she gave me away? What happened there, and all that kind of stuff. So it's really good for an adoptive, I think, for an adoptive parent to be open and honest because my father or my mother-in-law's parents did not tell her
Mm-hmm.
that they knew about what happened to the mother for years,
Mm-hmm.
and that genuinely affected her
Yeah,
because she didn't feel she was part of her adopted family. She
yeah.
didn't feel like she had a family and stuff. So it's really important that everybody's, I think, is open and honest
I
and
couldn't agree more. I couldn't, and if anything, it's funny. And again, we don't always know either what we're doing or what our children need. But like, I'm so with you that like, from day one, I would bring up his birth mother, and tell him, about her and how she kissed him all over his face and stories and blah. And I like, for years, if something would happen, and again, I like doing things organically, like bringing up race when things happen, bringing up his birth mother when it's sort of, and I would bring her up, and then I'd be like, "Do you want to talk about it more? Do you have any questions?" And he'd always be like, "Yeah, no." Like he never wanted to talk about it. He would almost be like, why do you bring, like he didn't say why do you bring her up, but he'd almost be like, why is she always bringing her up? And I found that fascinating. Like I thought he'd have questions, and I think he will one day. He still really doesn't ask me about her. I think what was happening was for the longest time he didn't want to see himself as not a part of our family. Like he just wanted to be like, you're my mom, and why are you making me confused about it? And so, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I'm with you that it's important to be open and honest. And I've told my son a million times, you can ask me anything. But I have found it fascinating. He has not, on his own, asked me anything.
well, and part of that I must say is because he's very happy where he is and he doesn't want anything to change. And that's the other thing. An adopted child can always be nervous that
Yeah,
the other family is going to come into their life and it may not be a great place for him to be when he's happy where he is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Who knows? Yeah, who knows? Yeah, and he does have some interaction with parts of his birth family now, but unfortunately, because of COVID, like that sort of has not happened as much in a long time, and so yeah, he just doesn't show a ton of interest right now. I'm thinking he will one day, and the good thing is just that he knows the path is open. Communication, like he can. I mean, I really do. I mean, I literally just say, "You can ask me anything if you ever want to talk about anything." So I think he really does know that.
Well, and you've written the book and you obviously care and you are wanting to do the absolute best that you can for him. And not only that, you're helping other people do the same thing. And by reading your book, they can get an insight as to perhaps a different way to be, a different way to take care of their child.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, it's funny. Someone once said to me, like, what does your son think of the book, or have you read parts of it to him? And I remember when I finished my like 10th and final draft of the book, and I had it printed out. I had like a stack of paper on my desk. My son knew I was writing a book about him, and I said to him, "I'm like, the book's done. Do you want to come see the book?" And he came down, and I pointed out the paper on the desk, and he was like, "That's just paper." Like he was so unimpressed, and he was like, "That's not a book." And so, and he has not really shown interest in me like reading parts of it to him or anything like that. But I do feel like the book is a little bit like my love letter to him, and I feel like I lost both my parents. They both died by the time they were 50. So I lost them young. And if my mom had a blog or a book or anything that I would have read it and reread. Like, so I feel like, I mean, God willing, I'm not going to die when I'm 50, but my son will always have a copy of this. And like if he goes off to college and he's feeling lonely, maybe I'll slip it on his bookshelf and he can sort of see it and just know it's there. And so I do like, I would not be surprised if he doesn't read it for a long time, but I bet one day he will, and just be really comforted to know and read about how much the mother in that book just loved her son and was doing everything she could to try to help him in a moment of need.
He will reach out and he will read that book, like a lot of folks that over the course of time, and be it in a used bookstore, be it at Barnes and Noble, be it online, somebody's going to read your book and it's going to make a difference in their life, and that's important.
Well, thanks. Well, I do have to say I had some early press. I wrote a piece about Mother's Day, this Mother's Day, in the summertime, and it was about interracial adoption. It had a picture of my son and me and my husband, and from that publication, it was in like a couple of local newspapers. I got like 3 different emails, and I got one woman. She sent me. She's much older now. She's like in her 80s. She's had her family for like 50 years, but she sent me a photo of like her Black son and this long hand, older one writing the big cursive, this long letter just saying how much she appreciated my piece. And for her to have adopted like 50 years ago interracially was really
That was
rare.
something. That was
Oh my
something.
God. So I can't even imagine some of what she went through. And it just touched my heart so much that she took the time to write this letter and send me a picture. And it made me realize, like, the hours and years of writing this book are worth it for many reasons. I mean, 1 for my son and 2 for me, it was cathartic, but if it touches even a few people, oh my God, it was worth it. Totally worth it.
And I can tell you it will.
Thank
It
you.
will. There will be people who listen to this show either now or later, and they will go pick up your book, and because it fulfills a need that is not going to go away
Yeah.
in our society. In fact, I think it's going to become even a bigger deal over
Well,
time.
let me just say, I do have right now on Goodreads a giveaway open. So you still have like 2 weeks to go on Goodreads. You can sign up to get the book for free if you're one of the lucky winners.
Oh,
Otherwise,
cool.
it's not for sale until October 18th. It comes out October 18th.
Oh, so I didn't realize that. So the book's not even out yet.
This is pre-publication press. Yes, no, they tell you to start promoting it early to get buzz. So
Well, wonderful. I'm glad that you're here, and we can be kind of like a world premiere kind of thing.
well, and I will say you can read the first couple chapters. So there are the first 3 chapters, I believe, available on my website, leahrachel.com. And I did partner with, in St. Louis, there's this nonprofit organization called Before Ferguson Beyond Ferguson, like one word, no spaces, Before Ferguson Beyond Ferguson.org. And it's a racial equity storytelling project. So there's a lot of journalists on the board, very board with people from all ages, all races, and they publish a lot of journalistic pieces. But they have been serially publishing parts of my book as well. So you can read a number of the chapters now, so that you will know for sure you want to buy it when it comes out.
Well, I think you should just bite the bullet and buy it, quite frankly. And it's something that could go on the coffee table, and you can and it would become a real topic of conversation when you have a bunch of people over to your house and
Yeah.
having a party and talking about, because these are one of those issues that they're not going to go away. They need to be talked about. They need to be understood so that we can get past this stuff that we are currently in.
Yeah.
And this, I don't even know what the white privilege and all that all that stuff.
Well,
So
and I've been in book clubs, and I can tell you that the better book clubs are the ones that like have stories that you can latch onto and talk about. And I mean, I really do feel like this is a book club kind of book. Like you read these chapters and you get together, and people are going to be like, I had no idea, or I have a story like this, or the way this happened, or maybe the mother should have done something differently. Because I had somebody else in an interview ask me if I like the way I've written the mother in the book, if I like that mother. Which I found a fascinating question, because she is based on me, but again, the book is fiction. And I will say that I tried to portray the mother honestly So maybe she's not perfect. Maybe she sometimes yells at her son and throws his phone in the trash when he's not listening to her and does things that she regrets later. So she's, again, motherhood is not easy or perfect, and you do dumb things sometimes. You just seek forgiveness afterwards. But so I do feel like it's a very good book club book. And my dream is that people order it and read it in October and think this is such a great book, and they buy 10 copies for Christmas to give to all their friends at
I think that's a wonderful idea. That really is a wonderful idea. And by the way, motherhood is messy. So is
And
fatherhood.
fatherhood. I do mean to say fatherhood too. It's true.
And I applaud your husband.
Yes. Yes.
For you guys were all in. You guys were of one mind, and you were all in on this deal. And it's not an easy thing. It takes a year and a half. You've got a bunch of classes you got to go to. It takes the time and effort.
Yep.
So congratulations. You did really
Thank you.
well.
Thank you. Yeah. And I mean, I feel like I've been telling all these stories that maybe sound a little scary or sad, but of course there is just the joy and the yumminess. I mean, I'm all about like hugs and kisses, and I love kissing my son. And there's just it's funny. I was rereading parts of I've had a blog for over 10 years, and I was rereading. I started it around the time we adopted my son. I was rereading parts of it, and I have all these things about how things can be messy, but then there was a phase, apparently I forgot it, but when my son would wake up every morning and before he peed, before anything, he would just run and give me a big hug, and then he would go like get ready for school, and like he just would hug me every morning. And that one hug makes the whole day worth it. It just, I mean, there's something exquisite about it. Just something exquisite about a parent's child love.
When my youngest son was, I think he was 11. And we would go to the grocery store, and I would hold his hand, and we would go in, and when he was 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, and then at one point, I reached for his hand and he pulled it back, and I knew that those days were gone,
Yeah.
and I was sad because I missed those days. You know, it's
Yeah.
and you know, if you're not a parent, if you're not going to get you don't understand what that really feels like.
No, I know, and I feel like it started particularly. Again, my son's more of an extrovert, so he's not like a stick around really close to my. So I feel like that started early, where he didn't want kisses and public displays of affection. So I learned. We have this thing now where like before I drop him off at school or a sleepover, wherever he's going, like as we're leaving the house, I'm like, okay, I want my hug now because I know you're not going to give it to me in front of anybody. So he knows now that he has to give me the goodbye hug when we're still at home, because I know the minute we get there, he's not going to want to like come near me with a hug or a kiss in front of anybody. So that's our thing now. He has to give it to me before we leave the house.
You are an incredible mother.
No, I just demand my hugs. I mean, I got to get something out of this.
Oh, that is just awesome, Leah Rachel. And by the way, she's got another book that's out that she said that is actually out now, and you could pick that one up too. And the name of that book is The Other Shakespeare.
The Other Shakespeare, yeah. So I wrote that one before this one, and that was I was reading a Virginia Woolf book once on a train. I was traveling to Chicago on the train, and A Room of One's Own. And in the Virginia Woolf book, in like one page, she describes like, what if William Shakespeare had been born a woman, like with the same talent and creativity, but a woman? What would have happened? And really quickly, in a few sentences, she says, well, of course, she would have been denied an education. She would have been forced to get married. Like, it wouldn't have ended well. And I remember reading that page. I remember looking up out the window and watching like the scenery pass. And I remember thinking, I need to write that book. So I wrote the book of what if William Shakespeare had been born a woman and what would have happened. And I followed what Virginia Woolf said pretty much as I could. So I will say it's not as optimistic as the current Seeking Forgiveness is. It's a little, I mean, what do you expect of women in 1500s in London, England, trying to be independent? It's not going to work out all that well. But I still think it was fascinating. It was really fun to research. And so all of the characters in the book, except for the female Shakespeare, which I call her Judith, but they're all real characters. So it's the real parents, the real neighbors, the real siblings. Like every single character in that book is a real character from the time of Shakespeare.
That's really cool. And if you don't know, I just thought I'd enlighten you that in the time of Shakespeare, they didn't even allow women to be on stage.
Nope. Yep, that's true. Men play the women's parts. Yep.
Yep, and nowadays that would be there would be people that, and anyway, but that's how they did it back then because women were less than, and they should be kept in the kitchen, stirring the pot,
Right.
and not getting out into public much.
Well, and yeah, and they often didn't even get an education. Couldn't go travel, couldn't do any of those things. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, even at the beginning of our country, which was in 1776, women couldn't vote for another 200 years,
Yeah,
virtually.
yeah,
So
yeah. I know, and don't get me started on what's happening today. Makes one nervous.
it does indeed. It does indeed. Well, we just need to stick together. And by the way, vote.
Yes.
Everybody,
Oh, thank you for saying that. I agree.
everybody needs to vote. And personally, I don't care what you vote for, but if everybody in the country voted, then we would have a a real honest consensus of
Hmm.
what we should be doing as a country,
Hmm.
because I think it's a crime that 40% at any given election, 40 to 45% of the electorate is what decides what's going to happen for all of us,
I
and
know.
that's
I
that
know.
should be wrong. That's wrong.
I agree, and it's only a drop in the bucket. It doesn't really matter, but I will just say that I always make on election day. I drive anybody who needs a ride anywhere, like to in order to vote. If anybody can't get there, so if you live in St. Louis, Missouri, and you need a ride on polling day, contact me through my website. I just drive people after I vote. I wake up, I vote first thing, and then I sign up usually through my synagogue to drive anybody that needs to vote. So hopefully that gets a few more people voting, but it's only a drop in the bucket. But yes, I mean, whatever we can do, and I'm with you too. Like, however you want to vote, vote. Just be a part of the process. Sort of become involved, become educated about what's going on, and just participate. I realize it's hard, and I feel like I'm sounding privilegey again because some people have three jobs and kids, and it's hard to get out and vote. And so I get that. That's why if there's anything I can do, like rides, just
Well, and what I've learned today is that you not only adopted your son, but you volunteer and you're willing to drive people around. You are what I would like to say is just a good person, and I think that's awesome. So
well,
I'm
thank
going to demand that everybody that listens to this buy the book. It's called Seeking Forgiveness, and Leah Rachel is the author. One of these days, when your son is a little older, I would love to have him on the podcast.
and I have a feeling he would love that too because I have no idea. He's only 12, but I really do believe he's going to go into something that's very social and extroverted. So I feel like he's either going to be like an actor or, God forbid, a politician. Or something. Or maybe like a podcast producer. He's going to be something where he talks to people and interacts with people. So, and and I don't know if this is because he knows I write, but actually last week, one of the first weeks of school, he came home and he was like, "Oh, there's an assignment to write. We have to write a story." And it's my favorite homework this week. Like, can you and he was really eager to show me what he wrote, and then we worked on it, and I helped him edit it. And then he's like, I really like writing. And I don't know if he's doing that because he wants to like get on my good side and he knows I like writing too. But oh my God, I went to bed that night thinking, if my son becomes a writer too, I think I will just cry tears of joy like nonstop. And then wouldn't it be neat if he wrote Seeking Forgiveness with a different title, of course, but from his perspective? Like, how
Absolutely.
cool would that be? Like the same book, but from his perspective, because the book is more from the mother since I wrote it. Like, I'd love for him to write his side of the story.
And I think he will. I think, and he's got a really good role model to start with. So,
Oh,
um, Leah, we're going to need to go away now. But before we do that, I had first of all, have you had a good time? This was fast. It went
oh
by
my
fast.
God, I can't believe it's been almost an hour. It feels like it was like 15 maybe minutes.
Yeah. And so, but what I want to do is I want to set myself aside and I want to give you the opportunity to talk to the people that are listening now and those that will be listening over time in all the forums that we're at to tell them anything that you'd like them to know.
Thank you. So, yeah, so let me just say again, you can find out anything about me as a writer, about both books. You can read the first couple chapters of both books, as well as like the essay I wrote about interracial adoption, everything at my writer's website, which is www.learachel, like no spaces, just LEARACHEL.com. So from there, you can get links to everything, including like the Amazon page and Barnes & Noble page where you can buy the books. But again, you can pre-order the Kindle now, and you can get the published hard copy, paperback, whatever, October 18th. And you can enter Goodreads giveaway now. There's going to be 100 copies given away if you're on Goodreads. And so the book, again, Seeking Forgiveness, comes out soon. And www.learachel.com.
And you are awesome to talk to. Will you come back so we can do this again?
Anytime. This really was fun. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you. And I'd love to book you on Positive Talk or on KKNW, because that goes out into Seattle, and Seattle's a pretty progressive town, but there's lots of folks that need support.
Yeah.
And their interracial marriages with interracial kids and all of that.
Well, and I love what you do, and I love that this is like positive talk radio. And so I was feeling a little bit bad in the interview. I felt like I was telling all these like sad stories, but like I do feel like the bottom line is positive. That like it is possible to interracially adopt, and it's a wonderful, joyful thing. And I love the education aspect of like learning about some of this. So positive talk. I mean, I would love to be on any of your shows.
Well, thank you so much. It's so fun to have you here, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much.
So if you will wait right there, I got to do this, and then I will be right back. Hey, thanks for enjoying this episode all the way to the end. Please give us a like and subscribe to this channel. This has been a production of positivetalkradio.net. Please visit our website, oddly named positivetalkradio.net, for more details about us and our mission, which is to provide great positive programming designed to inspire us all. I'm Kevin McDonald, and I'm proud of these shows, and I truly hope that you'll like them and share them with friends and family. So on behalf of our entire team, remember, be kind to one another, because each other